Welcome back to Masterminds and Wisdom. We love to deep dive into some pretty fascinating stories here. And today, we're going to be talking about this philosopher-like entrepreneur, the founder of Shokz. I'm sure many of you have heard of them. It's a worldwide known bone conduction earphone brand.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be diving into.
Definitely a fascinating guy.
Yeah, so let's talk about Shokz. I mean, you see them.
Everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
They're sold in major retailers and airports worldwide, it seems like.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, they've also got some pretty impressive accolades, too. They've earned a patent, gold medal, and recognition as a national manufacturing champion.
Yeah.
So they're doing something right.
Right. And what I think is so interesting about Shokz, it's not just their success in like the traditional business sense, in terms of those metrics, but Chen Hao, the founder, he has like this very distinct philosophy.
Okay.
He talks about this idea of standing while earning money, which is interesting.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What does standing while earning money actually look like? How does that manifest?
It's about building a business that has integrity, a business that's creating value in the long term, not just chasing those quick wins.
Yeah.
It prioritizes things like ethical practices and sustainability.
Which is refreshing.
It is. It's refreshing to see.
Because it's very easy, especially in the business world, to really focus on the bottom line and just kind of forget about the bigger picture sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So how did Shokz even get to this point? Like, it's not like they were an overnight sensation or anything like that, right?
Definitely not. Shokz started back in 2004 as a small factory, really doing mainly OEM work for other companies. But in 2007, they made this pivotal decision to focus on bone conduction technology.
I would imagine that was a pretty big gamble, especially back then. Like, bone conduction headphones weren't really I don't even think they were a thing, were they?
No. I mean, a lot of people hadn't even heard of them. So it really was a gamble. And actually, it took them 9 years of dedicated research before they had their breakthrough in 2016. And, this wasn't about writing a trend. They really created, a whole new category.
Right.
They essentially created the global market for open-ear headphones.
Oh, that's amazing.
And not only that, but they've also developed the world's only external integrated bone conduction hearing aid. So that's pretty cool.
And what I think is even more impressive about that is that they did all of this without relying on venture capital or any outside investors.
Yeah.
I mean, he bootstrapped the entire company, reinvesting profits to fuel their growth. I mean, talk about commitment,
It's huge. And, that approach also really aligns perfectly with his, what he calls lazy ant philosophy.
Lazy ant.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, it's not about being lazy in the traditional sense. It's actually about taking the time to really think deeply, to understand the fundamental principles that are underlying a problem before rushing into any sort of solution.
Okay.
So he really believes in, not cutting corners.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. It's about finding the most efficient and effective path to innovation.
Right.
And that's really reflected in how Shokz approaches everything they do.
Okay, I'm really curious about that.
Yeah.
So what sets their approach apart from, let's say, other companies in China that are known for, that really rapid innovation?
Yeah, I think Shokz is really focused on what Hao calls first principles.
Okay.
Meaning, they rigorously define these core concepts that they're working with, whether it's science or technology or engineering. And it's all about, achieving clarity.
Right.
And avoiding the pitfalls of, these vague ideas.
Okay, so it's about really building like that solid foundation of understanding.
Right.
Rather than just chasing the trends or the hype.
Yeah.
But how does that actually then translate into actual products and business strategies?
So they've developed this, what they call a dual-wheel drive model for innovation.
Okay, I like that.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So one wheel is this really deep understanding of their target audience.
Okay.
Really understanding their needs, their pain points.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other wheel is just this relentless pursuit of technological breakthroughs.
Okay.
So by combining those two things, they're able to create entirely new product categories, not just, sort of slight improvements to existing ones.
So it's not just about having like a cool new technology.
Right.
It's about really understanding how that technology can solve real problems for real people.
Exactly. And that's something that really sets them apart from a lot of companies that are focused on, let's say, business model innovation.
Right.
You think about these massive online platforms
Yeah.
or those companies that are really driven by marketing, where the focus is on branding rather than substance.
Right. So it's interesting how they've managed to stay true to that commitment to, this deep fundamental innovation, even as they've grown into a global brand.
Yeah.
And I would think that's pretty difficult to do.
It is, and their organizational structure really reflects that.
Okay.
So they have dedicated departments for fundamental research, for product innovation, and also product development. And, that's in stark contrast to a lot of companies that just focus on development.
Right.
Without really investing in the kind of original research that leads to those breakthroughs.
So it's not just about iterating on existing ideas.
Yeah.
They're actually trying to push the boundaries of what's even possible.
Exactly.
And I'm curious about how Chen Hao manages all of this.
Yeah.
Does his management style also reflect this sort of unique approach to innovation?
It does. He really emphasizes this team sport mentality,
Okay.
Prioritizing trust, empowerment, and really valuing each individual's contribution. He's created this culture where everyone really feels this sense of ownership over their work.
So it's not just about that top-down command control style of leadership.
No, not at all. But there's one thing he does that's quite fascinating.
Okay.
He requires weekly reports from all of his key executives.
Okay.
But here's the catch. The reports can only be 1 page long with a very specific font size.
Wow. Okay, so what's the reasoning behind that? Why would he do that?
It forces, those executives to really distill their thoughts, to really focus on what's truly essential.
Right.
And it keeps, Chen Hao connected to every aspect of the business without getting, bogged down in unnecessary details.
Yeah.
It's almost like a mindfulness exercise for management.
Yeah, I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So it's really about, clarity, efficiency, and just staying connected to the core of the business.
Yeah.
But it seems like Shokz's ambitions, they kind of go far beyond just headphones.
Right.
They ventured into medical devices and skincare products, even telemedicine in Indonesia. So that's pretty diverse.
It is, but it's not random diversification.
Okay.
These ventures are all carefully chosen to leverage, Shokz's existing strengths and to, reach new consumer markets strategically.
So they're not just spreading themselves thin.
No.
They're really trying to build a cohesive ecosystem
Right.
around their core competencies.
Exactly.
Can you give me an example of how that works in practice?
Yeah, their approach in Indonesia is a great example.
Go.
They've actually partnered with doctors to become influencers and promote local products.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a very clever way to tap into the local market.
Right.
And build trust with those consumers.
Yeah, that's really smart. It shows a real understanding of the Indonesian market.
Yeah.
And how to connect with consumers in a meaningful way.
Exactly. But there's another side to this story. So Chen Hao has expressed concerns about this relentless focus on profitability and short-term gains that he sees in, a lot of Chinese companies. He's actually worried about a culture of aggressive, what he calls followership, rather than original innovation.
Right. And it makes sense because it's easy to get caught up in, the race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Just copying what everyone else is doing instead of really trying to create something new and valuable.
Exactly. And he believes that this kind of short-term thinking is ultimately unsustainable. It can harm businesses in the long run.
Right.
And even potentially damage, those global relationships.
Yeah, and I can imagine, too, it's got to be incredibly frustrating if you're trying to build a company that's doing something truly different.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't fit neatly into those existing categories.
Yeah, absolutely. Chen Hao has talked about his frustration with investors that are really focused on those predictable profits and who struggle to grasp Shokz's, this diverse and evolving business model.
Right.
They just want a quick return. And that's not always compatible with deep, long-term innovation.
So it sounds like he's facing this classic dilemma
Yeah.
of, how to balance the demands of the market
Right.
with the need to stay true to his vision.
Right.
It's a tough spot.
It is. Yeah, it really does. And it makes you wonder, are our current systems even set up to support this kind of deep innovation?
Right.
Is there enough patience for that long game in a world that's just obsessed with immediate results.
It really makes you think about that, huh? It challenges a lot of assumptions about how businesses should operate.
It does.
So, I mean, do you think that Chen Hao is like, I mean, is he a maverick, like kind of swimming against the tide?
Hmm.
Or is he like a harbinger of like this kind of shift toward a more thoughtful, long-term approach?
That's a great question. And I think maybe like only time will tell, you know?
Oh,
But I do think his willingness to kind of question that conventional wisdom, that's what makes him so compelling as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
he's not afraid to kind of go against the grain,
right.
even if it means going up against some really powerful interests or challenging those established norms.
Yeah.
But it's not just talk.
Right.
He's actually putting his ideas into practice.
Yeah.
He's building a company that operates on this fundamentally different set of principles.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that takes a lot of courage to do that.
It does. And it's something that we can all learn from, you know, whether we're entrepreneurs or investors or just like people trying to make a difference in the world.
Yeah.
I think his story reminds us that it's possible to build successful businesses that are both profitable and ethical,
Right.
you know, that create value not just for shareholders, but also for society as a whole.
Yeah, I love that. Like when we were talking about the lazy ant philosophy, it seems so counterintuitive in our fast-paced world.
Right.
Right. But, I mean, maybe slowing down, thinking deeply, focusing on those fundamentals, maybe that's what actually leads to those more sustainable, impactful innovations.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that approach. You know, it's about resisting that urge to jump on every trend and instead focusing on building something truly unique and lasting.
Yeah.
It's about really understanding that the why behind the what,
Yeah.
you know?
So for our listeners, like, how do they start to incorporate some of those lazy ant approaches into their own lives? What would you say to them?
I would just encourage them to start by like asking more questions.
Okay.
You know, don't just accept things at face value. Dig
Mhm.
deeper. Try to understand the root causes of problems and challenge your own assumptions.
So, like, embrace curiosity.
Yeah,
And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.
absolutely. And don't be afraid to take your time.
Yeah.
You know, rushing into a decision or a solution without really carefully considering it, it leads to more problems down the road,
Yeah.
you know?
That's such a valuable lesson, though. It's so easy, especially in the world we live in today, to just, like, get caught up in all the busyness and forget to, like, slow down and think things through.
Right. And it's not just about the big decisions.
Okay.
You know, this approach can also apply to just like everyday situations as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay, can you give me an example?
Yeah, let's say you're trying to improve your productivity at work, right?
Okay.
Instead of just trying the latest, you know, time management app or technique, maybe take some time to really analyze your workflow.
Okay.
You know, identify those bottlenecks, those distractions, the things that are draining your energy.
Yeah.
And once you really understand the root causes of your productivity issues, you can start to implement those solutions that are much more effective and sustainable.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It's about getting to, like, the heart of the matter,
Yeah.
not just trying to, like, slap a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. And that's what, you know, Chen Hao is doing with Shokz. He's not just trying to build a successful company. He's trying to create like a new paradigm for how businesses operate, you know?
Yeah.
One that's based on that long-term thinking, those ethical practices, and that deep understanding of technology's role in society.
So we were talking about earlier, you mentioned that Shokz has expanded into some other areas like medical devices, telemedicine, things like that.
Right.
I'm kind of curious to hear a little bit more about those ventures.
Yeah.
Are they seeing, you know, similar success in those fields?
They are. And it's really fascinating to see how they're applying like those core principles to these new areas.
Okay.
So, for example, their telemedicine platform in Indonesia, it's not just about providing, you know, remote consultations.
Okay.
It's about building this whole ecosystem that connects doctors and patients and local pharmacies.
Interesting.
They've even partnered with like doctors to become influencers, promoting local products, building trust within that community.
That's smart. It's really about creating that holistic solution, right?
Yeah.
That addresses those specific needs
Right.
of, you know, that Indonesian market.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
not just about, like, technology for technology's sake.
Right.
It's really about using technology to actually make a difference
Yeah.
in people's lives.
And that's what I find so inspiring about his vision. You know, he really sees technology as this tool to solve problems.
Yeah.
And to create value,
Well-
not just like an end in itself.
That's a refreshing perspective.
Yeah.
In a world where it seems like we're just obsessed with the latest gadgets
Right.
and like, the shiny new tech trends.
Exactly. He's really focused on substance over hype.
Yeah.
He's not trying to build the next, flashy app or unicorn startup.
Right.
He's trying to build something meaningful, something that'll have a lasting impact.
I love that. It's a reminder that true innovation isn't about just chasing the next big thing.
Right.
It's about actually creating it.
It is.
And that often requires taking those risks, challenging those assumptions,
Yeah.
being willing to fail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not always a smooth or predictable path,
Right.
but it's the path that leads to the most groundbreaking, transformative innovations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking of risk, Chen Hao has mentioned the possibility of delisting Shokz from the stock market. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that would be a good move for the company?
It's a bold move, and it certainly goes against, the conventional wisdom of you have to prioritize shareholder value above all else.
Right.
But it does align with, his long-term vision
Yeah.
and his desire to build a company that's free from those short-term pressures of the public markets.
I mean, it would be a pretty powerful statement, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If he actually did that. Like a kind of a rejection of the idea that a company's sole purpose
Yeah.
is just to generate profits,
Yeah.
For its investors.
It would be. And I think it'd be really interesting to see if other companies follow suit.
Right.
Like maybe this is a sign of a shift in the business world,
Yeah.
a growing recognition that there are other ways to kind of measure success beyond those quarterly earnings reports
Right.
and stock prices.
I'm curious to see what he decides to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a decision with, potentially far-reaching implications, not just for Shokz,
Right.
but like for the future of business itself.
Yeah, I agree.
It really does feel like, he's kind of trying to redefine what it means to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Not just in China, but globally.
Right.
It's like it's not about following that like well-worn path. It's about really forging your own.
Totally.
So, I mean, he's a true innovator. What would you say are some of the biggest takeaways, like for a listener, that they could apply to their own life or their own work?
I think one of the key takeaways is just the importance of thinking for yourself, Don't be afraid to kind of challenge conventional wisdom or to go
Right.
against the grain. A lot of times those people who are most successful are the ones who are willing to think differently.
Yeah. It seems like so much of what we've talked about today really kind of boils down to like questioning your assumptions
Yeah,
and not being afraid to kind of carve your own path.
exactly. And that ties into, I think, another important lesson, which is the power of perseverance.
Yeah.
Chen Hao faced numerous challenges and setbacks, along the way, but he never gave up on his vision.
It took them 9 years to achieve that breakthrough with bone conduction technology.
Exactly.
That's almost a decade of like relentless pursuit.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So what do you think like Chen Hao would say to somebody who's listening who, they feel stuck, maybe they're afraid to take that leap of faith to pursue their dreams?
I think he'd tell them to find something they're truly passionate about, something that they really believe in with all their heart,
Yeah.
and then pursue it relentlessly.
Yeah.
Don't let fear or doubt hold you back.
Yeah. And probably also to apply that like that lazy ant philosophy.
Exactly.
Right? Like really think things through, develop a solid plan
All right.
before just diving in head first.
Totally. And he'd probably also emphasize, the importance of building a strong team.
Right.
Surrounding yourself with people who share your vision and who are committed to making it a reality.
Seems like a lot of this too resonates with like the idea that, success isn't just about achieving a specific outcome,
Right.
but it's also about the journey
Exactly.
and the person that you become along the way.
It's about learning, growing, constantly pushing yourself to be better.
Yeah.
It's about, making a positive impact on the world, even if it's in a small way.
And staying true to your values and your vision, even when it's difficult.
Yeah.
He could have easily taken the easier route.
Yeah.
Followed the crowd.
Yeah.
Focused on, maximizing profits above all else.
Right.
But he chose a different path, one that was more challenging, but ultimately probably more rewarding.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes his story so inspiring. It's a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference, to create something meaningful and leave a positive mark on the world.
It has been really fascinating, like kind of unpacking his approach, the success of Shokz.
It has.
What is like one thing that you hope our listeners take away from this deep dive?
I hope they come away with a sense of possibility, a belief that they can achieve anything that they set their minds to,
Yeah.
even if it seems impossible.
And I hope they're inspired to kind of embrace their own inner lazy ant.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah.
To slow down, think deeply, and challenge that status quo. I mean, who knows? Maybe one of our listeners will be the next Jen Hao, like disrupting an industry,
That'd be amazing.
challenging conventions, and building a business that makes a real difference.
Yeah. I like that thought. The world needs more innovators, more visionaries, more people who are willing to kind of stand up and make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Shokz.
And, the philosopher-like entrepreneur behind it all.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those ambitions soaring.